The entire ICU went quiet the moment Vanessa ripped the badge from my scrubs. "You're done, Daniel. You don't belong in my hospital." Her mother smirked from the doorway. The new hire Vanessa had been getting close to laughed out loud, right there in front of the nurses I'd trained and the patients I'd sat with all night. None of them knew that the man walking toward the exit held the one signature that could decide the future of the hospital they were all so proud to call theirs. I didn't cry. I picked up my coat. I walked past the staff I'd mentored for a decade. I walked past the beds I'd sat beside until sunrise, more nights than I could count. Vanessa crossed her arms and watched me go, chin up, looking taller than she'd looked in years. She had no idea the man she was throwing into the storm was quietly holding everything she'd ever wanted. In my bag was an envelope, cream-colored, sealed, my father's handwriting across the front. I'd carried it for 2 years and never opened it. I held it now in the parking lot, under a streetlight, and still, I didn't cry. 10 years ago, I was supposed to be a doctor, top of my class, a scholarship lined up to finish medical school, professors already talking about residency programs like my acceptance was a formality. Then my father got sick, and there was nobody else willing to leave their life behind to sit at his bedside. So I did. I put the white coat plans in a drawer. I fed him. I bathed him. I read to him after his eyes stopped focusing on the page. Vanessa was a young hospital administrator back then, sharp, hungry, the kind of charming that made you feel like the only person in a crowded room. She told me I was the strongest man she'd ever met for doing what I was doing. I believed her completely. We married in a small church with a small guest list, and my father, thin and gray by then, gave a version of a blessing from a wheelchair someone had to hold steady. "Take care of my son," he told her, the words costing him more breath than he had to spare. "With my life," Vanessa said. My father looked at her for a long moment. He didn't smile. He passed later that year. Before he did, he pressed a cream-colored envelope into my hand, his grip weaker than I'd ever felt it. "Not now," he whispered. "When they show you who they are, open it. You'll know the day." I thought it was the fever talking, or grief, or both. I put it in a drawer and told myself I'd read it someday, when the ache had faded enough to bear it. Years passed instead. Vanessa climbed, floor supervisor, then department head, then the kind of administrative track where people start using your first name in meetings you weren't invited to. I stayed a nurse, mostly nights, so her schedule could stay clear for the meetings that mattered. I covered mistakes on the floor that would have cost other people their license, and I never once mentioned it, not to her, not to anyone. Her mother, Eleanor, came for dinner every Sunday and found a fresh way each time to make the job I loved sound smaller than it was. "Nursing is sweet," she liked to say, refilling her wine without asking. "But it isn't really a career, is it? Not like Vanessa's." I said nothing. I poured the tea. I kept carrying that envelope from drawer to drawer in every apartment we moved into, never once opening it, telling myself the day my father meant hadn't come yet. Then came Trevor. New hire, easy smile, always somehow exactly where Vanessa was. His name started coming up at breakfast, then at midnight when her phone lit up on the nightstand, then in photos from department events where the two of them stood just slightly too close for two colleagues comparing notes on a budget report. I saw it. I'm not a fool. Whatever else that year proved about me, I just kept working, kept quiet, kept carrying that envelope everywhere I went, still sealed, still waiting for a day I couldn't yet name. Trevor had a way of being pleasant to me that felt more like a performance than an actual feeling. The kind of politeness a man uses when he already believes he's won something and can afford to be gracious about it. He'd nod at me in the break room, ask how my shift was going, and somewhere underneath it, I could always feel the shape of a question he never quite asked out loud. "How much longer are you actually planning on being in the way?" I didn't confront Vanessa about any of it. Some part of me, The part that had spent a decade quietly absorbing everyone else's disappointment without complaint had gotten very good at telling myself that keeping the peace and keeping score were the same thing. They weren't. I was about to learn exactly how far apart those two things really were. It happened on a Tuesday, the end of a double shift, in front of the entire ICU. I'd covered for a nurse who'd called in sick, which meant 16 hours on my feet by the time Vanessa found me at the med station. Trevor half a step behind her the way he always was lately, like a shadow that had started showing up before the person casting it. "We need to talk," she said, in the voice she used for staff meetings, not marriages. "Can it wait 10 minutes? I've got a patient." "No," she said, "it can't." She said it loud enough that 3 nurses looked up from their charts. That was the first sign this wasn't going to be a private conversation, whatever it was. "I've reviewed the incident reports from the East Floor," she said. "Your name is on 2 of them this month. I can't have that kind of liability under my hospital." "Your hospital," I repeated, because something about the phrase snagged on me even then, though I couldn't have told you why. "You're done, Daniel," she said, and reached out and tore the badge clean off my scrubs before I'd even processed that her hand was moving. The clip scraped a thin line across my collarbone on its way off. "You don't belong in my hospital." Behind her, Eleanor smiled the smile of a woman who'd been waiting years for that exact sentence to get said out loud. Trevor didn't even try to hide it. He laughed, short, delighted, entirely unbothered by the fact that an entire ward full of nurses and patients had just watched a marriage end in real time under fluorescent lighting. I didn't argue. I didn't reach for the badge on the floor. I picked up my coat off the back of a chair, and I walked. Past Priya at the nurse's station, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Past a bed where I'd sat with a dying man's family until 4 that morning, 3 days earlier. Past 10 years of nights nobody else wanted to work. Vanessa crossed her arms and watched me go. I remember thinking, right before the doors closed behind me, that she looked taller than I'd seen her look in a very long time. I didn't cry in the parking lot. I sat in my car under a flickering streetlight, and I finally opened the glove compartment where I'd kept the envelope for longer than I could easily explain, and I held it in both hands for a long time before I broke the seal. Inside was a single card and a phone number. The card said, "Call Solomon. He kept it safe. It was always yours." I didn't call that night. I sat with it until close to sunrise, one question turning over and over in my head. What did my father know, all those years ago, watching a woman promise him, "with my life," from a folding chair beside his own deathbed, that had taken this long to actually matter? I called Solomon at 8 the next morning. He picked up on the second ring, like he'd been waiting for exactly this call for longer than felt reasonable. "Mr. Osei," he said, my father's name, not mine, though I'd carried it my whole life without ever hearing anyone use it quite like that. I wondered when this would come. "Solomon, what did my father leave me?" A pause, long enough that I could hear him deciding how much to say over a phone line. "More than you think," he said finally, "but not like this. Come to my office this morning. And Daniel, don't sign anything Vanessa puts in front of you between now and then. Not one page." The line went quiet before I could ask him what that was supposed to mean. I sat in my kitchen with the card in my hand until the sun actually came up, and for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit, I felt something underneath the humiliation of the night before that I hadn't expected to feel yet. Not hope exactly, just the sense that the ground under this whole marriage had never been quite where I thought it was. Solomon's office was old wood and quiet light, the kind of room that made you lower your voice without being told to. He set a thick folder on the desk and didn't open it right away. "Your father didn't leave you money," he said. Something in my chest dropped anyway, even though I hadn't been expecting money in the first place. "Then what?" "He left you a trust." He tapped the folder twice. "Money runs out eventually. A trust holds things, buildings, companies, control." "Control of what?" He almost smiled, The way people do when they've been sitting on something for years and are finally allowed to start letting it out. We'll get there. This gets handled like evidence, not revenge. One step at a time. He slid a single page across the desk. A holding company name sat at the top. Vantage Health Holdings. Read that name. Remember it. You'll hear it again soon. I didn't know it yet, but I'd heard that name before. Muttered on Vanessa's end of a late-night phone call I hadn't been meant to overhear, back when I still assumed it was just some vendor contract she was chasing. Why does that sound familiar? I asked. In time, Solomon said, and that was all I got out of him that morning. I went home and started writing things down. Every strange detail from the last year that had never quite added up. Every number that didn't match a story I'd been told. I made myself, for the first time in my marriage, a quiet witness to my own life instead of just a participant in it. The first thing that didn't add up arrived by mail 4 days later. A credit card statement, my name on the account, an account I'd never opened. $11,000 spent on things I'd never bought. I brought it straight to Solomon. He looked at it for a long time before he spoke. Someone opened this using your information, he said. Someone with access to your house. Why would anyone run up debt in my name? I asked, though some part of me had already started assembling an answer I didn't want. To make you look reckless, Solomon said quietly. A reckless husband is easier to divorce, easier to push out of things that matter. He set it into a growing folder of its own. Keep every statement. Don't confront her yet. The next piece came from inside the hospital itself, slid across a break room table by a records clerk who'd known me long enough to trust with something like this. An expansion contract, Vanessa's signature deal, her ladder to chief executive, the one she'd been chasing for 2 years. Near the bottom of the page, one line was highlighted in yellow. Subject to approval by the majority owner, Vantage Health Holdings. That name again. I stood in the parking structure staring at that single line until my hands went cold in the afternoon heat. Her entire future, the whole deal she'd apparently reorganized our marriage around, needed the sign-off of the very company my father had quietly left in my name. I just didn't know yet how much of it was actually mine to give. I called Solomon from the car. The deal needs Vantage's approval, I said. Do I own part of Vantage? Silence on the line, longer than the last one. Come in tomorrow, he said. There's more, but not yet. That night, Trevor made his first real move, though I didn't understand it as a move until much later. He posted a photo from Vanessa's house, the hallway wall where our wedding photos used to hang, bare now except for the outline where the frames had been. The caption read, "Some spaces feel better once the past gets removed." Half the hospital saw it before morning shift change. I saw it too. I didn't cry over it. I saved it, sent it to Solomon, and typed one word underneath. Evidence. The next morning, Solomon finally opened the folder the rest of the way. Your father founded Vantage, he said. He built this hospital before you were even born. He kept his name off the door on purpose. He wanted to see, over time, who would treat people kindly when they thought nobody important was watching. He turned a page. Vantage owns the hospital, and you, Daniel, aren't a shareholder. You're the name's successor. When the trust activates, you control all of it. The room went very still around me. I own the hospital, I said slowly. The one she fired me from 3 days ago. You own the ground she's standing on, Solomon said. She doesn't know that yet. Her deal can't close without your signature. And from what this credit card and this contract are starting to suggest, someone close to her has already been trying to forge a way around you. That's a crime, I said. That's exactly what it is, Solomon agreed. Not a divorce, a felony. But we wait. We let her reach for it in front of everyone. 2 days later, the game turned again. Trevor came to find me, not to fight, but to offer a deal, cool as glass, like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I know about Vantage, he said. I did my homework long before Vanessa ever thought to look. I didn't come here for her, Daniel. I came here for the hospital. I kept my face still. Then why tell me? Because she's going to lose, he said. And when she does, I'd rather be standing next to the man who wins. Sign the deal through me, and I'll make sure your name stays clean through all of it. Refuse, and I hand Vanessa everything I know about what you and Solomon have been building, and the two of us bury you together. So the affair had never really been about affection at all. He was a player, and this was simply his next move on the board. I looked at him for a long moment. No, I said, just that. He smiled, thin and cold. Then it's war. He didn't know I'd already recorded every word of it. That night, Vanessa made her countermove. She filed for divorce, fast, and for full custody of Ada, our 7-year-old daughter, in the same motion. Her filing called me unstable, reckless, a man with secret debt in a public breakdown, unfit to raise a child. The credit card, the badge on the ICU floor, the bare wall in the hallway, somehow framed as evidence of my instability instead of her own choices. She'd built the entire story, brick by brick, months in advance of ever using it. I read the custody papers at my kitchen table. I didn't cry. I called Solomon, and I kept my voice steady. She's using our daughter, I said. I know, Solomon said, gently, for the first time since any of this had started. And that's the mistake that ends her. There's a clause in the trust for exactly this. Not yet, though. Get Ada somewhere safe. Come to the gala and bring everything. The gala? The foundation gala, he said, where the Vantage succession gets read aloud, by law, once a year, in front of the entire board and half the hospital. She's already invited herself to celebrate her deal there. Let her. The gala was gold light and long tables, and every important face in the city arranged under one roof. Vanessa stood at the front with Trevor at her side, and Eleanor beaming a few steps back, already halfway through a speech about the future of the hospital, wearing the particular smile of a woman who believes she already owns the room she's standing in. She didn't see me come in. I wore black. I carried nothing but a slim folder and a kind of calm I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. The board chairman stepped up for what everyone assumed was the year's dullest formality, the annual reading of the Vantage succession. As required, he began, we confirm the controlling successor of Vantage Health Holdings, owner of this hospital. Vanessa laughed softly at something Trevor murmured beside her. She thought it was noise, background music for her own evening. The successor, the chairman said, is Daniel Osei. The room turned, every head at every table, all at once, like a single machine. Vanessa stopped laughing mid-breath. I walked to the front slowly. I took the microphone with a hand that, to my own surprise, didn't shake at all. Good evening, I said. Some of you watched my wife tear the badge off my chest 4 nights ago. You watched her tell me I didn't belong in her hospital. I let that sit in the room for a second longer than was comfortable. It was never her hospital. My father built it, years before either of us walked its halls. He left it to me. Every wall she stood so tall in front of, I own. Eleanor's face went the color of the tablecloths. You can't, Vanessa said. You can't do this. I can, I said. And the deal you reorganized our entire marriage around cannot close without my signature. I looked at her, and for the first time all night, I let myself feel exactly as tired as I actually was. I won't be signing it. The room erupted. That was the first wave. Solomon stepped up to the microphone next, and the second one landed harder. There's more, he said, the way he always eventually said there was. He opened the folder slowly. The expansion contracts Miss Vanessa submitted to this board carry a signature from the Vantage successor, authorizing the deal. That successor never signed a single page of it. These documents are forged. That isn't a family matter. That's a felony. For a full breath, the ballroom forgot how to make noise. Chairs scraped back, one at a time, as board members rose to their feet, staring at Vanessa like they were seeing her for the first time in years of working beside her. Doctors traded glances. Nurses who'd watched her tear my badge off 4 nights earlier lowered their eyes in something that looked almost like shame before lifting them back up toward me with an expression I hadn't seen aim my way in a very long time. No one moved to defend her. Then, near the back, an older nurse I'd trained a decade ago slowly began to clap. Once, twice, another joined her. Within seconds, the applause rolled table to table until nearly the whole ballroom was on its feet. Vanessa spun toward Trevor. "Say something. Tell them this is insane." Trevor stepped back from her instead, right there under the chandeliers. "I'm not going down with you," he said, and turned toward the board. "She asked me to help hide the forgery. I have the messages. I'll hand every one of them over." He'd chosen the winning side exactly the way he'd always planned to. Two security officers walked forward, calm and unhurried. "Miss Vanessa," one of them said, "by order of the board, your executive access is suspended, effective immediately." Her hand went to the badge clipped to her jacket, the same motion, I noticed, as the one that had torn mine off my chest 4 nights before. Her fingers hesitated on the clip, in a way mine never had. She unclipped it. He took it without a word. She reached for her last card anyway. "The custody filing," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "He's unstable, that's on record." Solomon almost looked like he pitied her for it. "The trust has a clause your husband never needed to read because his father wrote it for exactly this evening. Any successor attacked through their own child forfeits nothing. The attacker forfeits everything held jointly." He closed the folder. "You didn't just lose the deal tonight, Vanessa. By filing those custody papers, you signed away every asset this marriage ever shared." She sat down hard, like her legs had simply stopped agreeing to hold her up. I didn't gloat. I looked at the woman I'd once stood beside at my father's wheelchair, promising him she'd take care of me, and I felt something quieter than anger settle into the space where the anger should have been. "You showed me who you were," I said, quiet enough that only she really heard it. "Just like he told me you would." I left the gala on my own 2 feet, the same way I'd left the ICU 4 nights earlier. Only this time, the whole room stood while I did it. The hospital felt strangely quiet the following Monday. Word travels faster through a building like that than through almost anywhere else I've ever worked. Every nurse knew, every resident knew, even the volunteers at the front desk had started using a tone I hadn't heard used about me before. I walked in around 8 in a plain gray suit instead of scrubs, carrying nothing but a slim folder. I didn't expect applause, and mostly I didn't get it. Just a different kind of quiet than the one 4 nights earlier. Nods instead of stares. A hand on my shoulder from Priya at the front desk that said more than a sentence would have. Eleanor found me by the elevators before I made it to the East Wing. Her hands were shaking in a way I'd genuinely never seen from her. "Daniel," she said. I turned toward her, politely. "I was wrong," she said, and each word seemed to cost her something. "I judged you by your title instead of your heart." I looked at her for a moment. There wasn't much anger left in me to spend on it. My father spent his whole life watching how people treated the ones who couldn't do anything for them, I said. He was rarely disappointed in what that showed him. She lowered her head. She didn't have an answer for that, and I didn't wait around for her to find one. Vanessa lost the deal that night at the gala. She lost the forged contract, the custody fight, and eventually, once the investigation ran its course, her license as well. Trevor testified, walked away clean, and went looking for his next winning side, the way men like him always do. I kept the hospital, but I didn't run it the way it had been run under her. I took the East Wing, the one Vanessa had wanted to sell off 2 years earlier, and built something in my father's name instead. A free maternal and community clinic, open doors, night hours, nurses paid what they were actually worth. I hung one photograph in the lobby. My father, thin and gray, smiling from a wheelchair someone had to hold steady for the picture. Underneath it, a small brass plate. He watched to see who would be kind. Ada is growing up in those halls now, The same way I once grew up believing a white coat was the only kind of future worth chasing. She's learning something different from what I learned at her age, that the strongest thing a person can carry isn't a title or a badge or a corner office. Sometimes it's just a sealed envelope, held quietly for years, opened only when it's finally time. I never did become a doctor. I became something this hospital had never actually had before, an owner who still remembers every name on every floor. If you've ever been underestimated by somebody who judged you by your job instead of your character, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story kept you here until the end, hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.